Hi, everybody. I'm John Willow. I can see all the infrastructure people walked away. That's okay. I'm here to talk about digital equity. Actually, Bree and I are. So I just want to thank you guys for being here. We started out making a presentation to give you guys a primer on how to put plans together and to talk to you about what you're doing. But so much has happened in the last 2 weeks with digital equity plan drafts and funding announcements and award announcements and the new NOFOs coming out that we decided to take a step back and maybe talk a little bit about the process that's upcoming and to help anyone who's planning to do some digital equity work to get their thoughts around that. So today, I'm really, really happy that Chris Hall from the Iowa office of the NTIA is here, as well as Jeff Burkus, the State of Iowa Digital Broadband Coordinator, or Broadband Digital Equity Coordinator. I'm sorry, it was a long day. So he's here too. And so we intend to make this as a fairly interactive presentation, and we'll be calling on Chris and Jeff to help us too as we go through with this. So with that, I'm going to kick it to Bree Dillavou, our digital navigator.
Hi guys, I'm Bree Dillavou. I am the digital navigator for CBAN. So I am actually on the ground out in southern Iowa doing digital navigation work right now. Digital navigation has really taken off in the last few months alone as we get more exposure. As the ACP ended and that was in the news, that really kind of made it apparent how much we need some kind of solution within our communities, within our states, that is going to provide a long-term solution for not only digital inclusion, digital skills, but digital equity as a whole. Digital equity as a whole, the plan, we need to wrap around every part of it, not just infrastructure, but the skills and the devices. It is a big plan, big picture to make sure that people are connected, not just in libraries, not just at home, but everywhere they go, so that they have the opportunities to participate in the digital world.
Slide.
So what is the promise of digital equity? What does that actually look like when we are talking to people, when we are looking in a room? What does digital equity plans look like? Well, first off, there are a number of barriers that every community is going to have to overcome. And those barriers is what's going to define kind of your goals. You look at your goals. What do I need to do? Where can we help our population and our community? And then you look at the plan. Infrastructure. Is the infrastructure there? How can we get devices into people's hands? And how can we get them the skills? It's really has to all come together. You cannot have one piece without the other, or the whole ship just does not work.
Next slide. That's you.
So digital equity plans, I kind of already talked about overcoming those barriers, but they really are that you need to have access to telehealth. Access to telehealth is a huge one. In workforce, 92% of workforce development research shows that you need some kind of technological digital skill within that position, but 1/3 do not have any skills, over 1/3 actually. So what kind of skills, what kind of programs do you need to put in place in your communities, the states put in place to wrap around those and get them the skills, have a more employable workforce that have the ability to come in and start at the ground where you don't need to do so much fundamental training. All of that looks at telehealth as well. We all know with COVID, as COVID came around, we all did this shift from being in person to kind of online, and now as we get back, everything's back opening up. Telehealth is still something that we are going to be seeing quite a bit of, which it also needs security, internet security. It has personal information, there's HIPAA rules and whatnot you have to follow. Getting people the information of how to use it, getting them confident, working with libraries, hospitals, all of these people, it seems like it's really overwhelming, but you really need to look at the big picture and see, who can I bring into this picture? Who's included in this? How do I plan this? And who do I need to talk to? So it's not just your IT people. It's not just the people that are working directly in the digital world. When you go to a community service organization, who within that community service works with the population? If you work with a social service provider, you know, they get questions, people come in, how do I do this? Well, if they had a digital navigator or someone in that role that had those skills, they are there to help and they can connect those people to those resources.
This is more of a resource slide in case anyone wasn't like totally up to speed on what covered populations are. But our digital equity plans have to address these covered populations. So when we think about putting our work together, we need to absolutely address low-income households, or at least a combination of these. Some of them. Whoever's in your community, be sure and look and say, like, do we have a sizable population of people over the age of 60 we can help? Rural areas, that's going to be a big one in this room here in Iowa and in a lot of other parts of the country. People with disabilities, incarcerated individuals, veterans, language barriers, and members of racial and ethnic minority groups. So when we're thinking about digital equity planning, we're looking at vulnerable populations. Those are the covered populations according to the Digital Equity Act that we're looking to cover.
And real quick, before we move on, I wanted to just say I wanted to give you guys some actual examples of some successes that we have had. ACP is winding down. That is the funding for that. I believe this month is the last month that it is funded. We have had to come up with a solution. People are losing that ACP, but they still need to be connected. What is that solution? For us, it was using hotspots and coming up with a program for that we can provide to our community. Bringing these hotspots has really kind of not only brought our community together, but it's lessened the burden on our libraries. People are going to libraries every 2 weeks. They're checking them out. They wait 2 weeks, and they're checking them out again. If we can get home internet and give them a resource that gives them the ability to take classes, find a better job, learn more skills, or just do what they need to in that year, that they don't have to worry about paying for their internet or how am I going to stay connected? If you have students, that's another big one. It gives peace of mind. And I have one family in particular that we provided with a hotspot, and it completely changed their lives. The mom was able, she's in classes now. The kids, they needed it for school because they were going 2 weeks with internet, 2 weeks without. It was really causing problems with grades with these high schoolers. Their grades are awesome now. I got thank yous, and not only that, but I know that these young individuals are going to have the skills and the opportunities to go on to college. They're not just working on iPads or mobile phones. They have a computer. They can do those skills that employers are going to need one day. And this mother also, she feels great. She knows that she provided what she needs to for her kids, and I was able to help. That kind of wraparound service of providing the device with the skills and the technology and having that infrastructure, it's really one big picture that needs to come together in all parts.
Yep. So Bree's referring to a partnership we were able to put together with US Cellular, and they worked very hard for us with their government and nonprofit divisions to create a new billing model and a new service model, so that we've been able to, through our grant through the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, we have a budget for devices to buy things for the people in our service area. But a lot of our people just literally have zero signal. So this was a way for us, while we're waiting for networks to be built, to provide this service for people. When we hand them the hotspot, they have unlimited 5G for a full year, and then they own the hotspot. They sign the contract for it, and then US Cellular will contact them. And this was the part that we couldn't get from anybody else. So this is why I just really want to thank them in this moment for doing that work. They will follow back up with the people who own the hotspots and say, if you don't have a solution for internet right now, and you need to keep going with this hotspot, then you can sign up for a regular low-cost US Cellular plan. And if we have a subsidy back by then, it will be in the subsidized plan range. So when this is like show me the money and thinking entrepreneurially, this is like creative problem solving in under-resourced regions. And so this is what we're talking about when there's digital equity planning, and then there's digital equity on the ground, and the two have to meet. So I want to talk about digital equity in your organizations for just a second. So I'm going to ask you guys to do me a favor and pick up your phones and scan that QR code, or type in that, or capture that link, one or the other. And I would love it if you would answer our one question survey. Sorry, Gigi.
We know you guys are all good for one question before happy hour. This is your happy hour compensation.
I was gonna say, if you need help scanning the QR code, we have a digital navigator.
Yeah, we have a digital navigator.
I have taught lots of.
Oh, it wasn't.
Okay.
It's supposed to be widely shared. It's supposed to be open to anybody with the link.
Okay.
Okay, you know what? I actually can take care of that right now if everybody just will give me a second. Bree, you just riff. I'm just gonna fix the permissions.
Okay.
Okay.
The question that we're asking you is, we're trying to get a feel for the organizations, what kind of organization you work for, and are you doing digital equity already? What does digital, if you guys are comfortable sharing, what's digital equity look like within your organization right now? Are you doing anything? Have you started? Have you considered it? Do you need to, but you don't know how to get started?
Almost. Okay.
You can also just directly type in that link, everybody.
Oh, yes. Well,
Yeah,
it
they
has
still
to have
need permissions. That's the.
Oh,
thing.
it still
Yeah,
needs
it's
permission,
just-
doesn't it?
It's permission to take that. Yeah.
Mucho apologies.
Yeah. No, I mutually apologize because I actually did test this. I promise. But we were having permissions issues today, so it's making me sign in.
We can't blame it on GoDaddy this time.
Shut up. That's not inside any baseball or anything.
And we would encourage those of you online too, if you wanted to just type in a message on the chat about your activities, we'll be happy to share those with the group here as well.
You know what? I think we're going to have to just move on from this part of the exercise so that we don't get truncated. But it's okay. What I was really hoping to, what I really want to talk about today, and I still want to talk about it, is what kind of work you guys are doing in your organizations. But before we get to that, we'll do the next slide. And this is where Chris Hall comes in handy. Chris, where are you? Hi. All right. So there are a passel of digital equity grants just about to come down the pipeline. All the grants are coming from the NTIA, from the Digital Equity Act. They go two places. Two of the grants come through the states. The state planning grant program, that was a $60 million program, is done. A state capacity grant program that comes through, and that is the state capacity grant program is the program that's the digital equity plan that Jeff wrote and that everyone has written, and the funds from that program will be controlled by the states, but there's also a competitive grant program that any organization can apply for, and we can let's move forward a little bit. Let's move to the next slide. Okay, let's move to the next slide. So the capacity grants can be used for these 5 purposes: to maintain or update a state's digital equity plan, to implement the plan, to make subgrants to implement the plan, to evaluate the subgrantee's efforts, and to cover overhead. The competitive grants, on the next slide. Oh, that's okay. That's a discretionary grant program that's administered by NTIA. So it'll fund annual grant programs for 5 years to implement digital equity projects. So these are the programs that fill in around where the states had to stay within their 5 categories. We can do a little bit more here, as I understand it, and the base of applicants is pretty generous as well. So state political subdivisions, tribal governments, nonprofits, that's obvious, community anchor institutions, there you go, local educational entities, and then entities that carry out workforce development programs. Some of these can be for profits, they can be different kinds of nonprofits, but the money is funneling that way. And Chris, I was wondering, was that all right? Yes. Was that clear? Can you talk a little bit, Chris, about some of the deadlines that are coming up and how the process is going to work for people?
Sure. So yes, you also have given a good overview. I would say the state planning grants just recently closed. So the very end of March, the last batch of states submitted their plans to NTIA, and each of those plans are in the final stages of being accepted. So each state has spent the better part of the last year to year and a half putting together a plan, evaluating what is in their backyard, both who they have as covered populations that exist in each state or territory, and also what barriers they face for digital equity. Now that they've drawn and drafted a plan, NTIA is reviewing those plans and accepting them. The second phase is the capacity grant program, which was just up on screen. And those capacity grants are going to be awarded to the states that just put together a plan. Those capacity dollars are really geared toward implementation. So after drawing a plan, what would you want to do next? You'd want to follow your plan and have funds made available both to the states that drafted them and to sub-grantees and organizations that can actually help put those plans into action, filtering the dollars out into the states to tackle these barriers and make digital equity more of a reality. The third program is that competitive program, and that is one that bypasses the states as a filter and goes directly to organizations that work in the digital equity space. So these organizations, they could be local governments, they could be community organizations or community anchor institutions, and they will have an opportunity to apply directly to NTIA and compete, hence the name competitive grant, compete in a competitive grant scoring and review process to get dollars to actually help put these in action at a local level. So they have the opportunity to operate within their state's plan and contribute towards some of the goals and use the data that's been identified. But they also have the opportunity to be more creative and perhaps really focus in on a specific area of expertise that they've developed.
Can I ask, I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
Do you know yet what the grant range, the grant minimums and maximums are on the competitive grants? And I ask this because there is, among smaller organizations that do digital equity work, I have heard conversation that there's a concern that that those competitive grants will end up getting soaked up by very large organizations, so that like individual programs in individual regions won't be. Mm-hmm. Is that what's the range like?
Well, I would say at this point, the competitive grant is being drafted. It's being worked through at the NTIA level among program leadership and legal counsel. And so folks such as myself that work on the ground in each of these states actually don't have a great sense of what a minimum or a maximum allocation will be. We haven't seen the draft of that notice yet.
Has there been conversation around when talking about the purpose of the grant, of that competitive grant? Has there been conversation that would help people understand if it's more, if there is opportunity at the local level, or if it is more of a national grant, like national nonprofits and agencies?
What you see in the competitive grant, I think, is a good point of emphasis to start with. And the eligible applicants, the people who can apply for the competitive grant, are generally defined as community-based organizations. It's local governments, not state governments. It is community organizations and community anchor institutions and nonprofits. So not necessarily a local versus a national nonprofit. They might both be eligible. But there is an emphasis being placed on digital equity work in the community space.
That's terrific.
And I would say also where you've seen allocations to the states thus far, they've been a formula-based allocation. It's based both on population of each state and also based on the number of people who happen to fall into one of those covered populations. So NTIA is seeking to distribute the dollars in an equitable form, and I think that you'll see that continue in the competitive grant process.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chris. I'm not done with you yet, though. Or I might be. I'm just you want to go to the next slide, Curtis? The next slide. Oh, sorry. So this is my attempt to clarify the digital equity grants timeline. So like I said, we started in 2022 at the state with the state planning grant. This has been going on a long time already, you guys, and long more to go. The state planning, the digital equity grants, our drafts were completed at the end of 23. Now the capacity grant program runs January through June for 5-year state capacity projects. The application and award period, if I have that right. Do I have that right, Jeff? The 2024. Do I need some better clarification on that? Right. I just noticed that and I pulled it off of the NTIA website, and I now see that as soon as I looked at it just now, I'm like, that's not January through June, it's already April. But that will hopefully, that will happen sometime this year. We'll start seeing applications and awards for the capacity grants. And then the competitive grant, after the state capacity awards are done, and that is really a good thing because you'll know what you have and you'll know what you still need. Then we will start the competitive grant program, and hopefully Chris has not been bamboozled in any way by hearing that we're going to have a local emphasis there. That would be terrific. Jeff. Todd, can you give him the mic? I can't hear him.
I can only speak for Iowa, but I will say that the gears of state government are not the fastest. So just because we get the allocation from the federal government does not mean that we will immediately be able to give that out to, and we haven't even decided exactly what that's going to look like. So,
Sure.
So no promising of like that you would know what, that anybody would know what they could get from the state grant, if that's even a path that we're going to go down, for you to know what to go after for the competitive. So, but I will say in the Iowa plan, we try to be, we built it in a specific way where we have, pots or buckets that we think that we're going to go after to try to address. And then there are specific things that we thought local communities would be better served at addressing rather than the state. And those are identified so that if an organization wanted to hook into the state plan, they could say, the state of Iowa plan on page 83 says we would like to do that work. This is how much it would cost. So we tried to lay that out as specific as possible to make it easier to be competitive on the competitive grants.
Terrific. Let's take a show of hands, just so I kind of know where we are. Is anyone in your organization, raise your hand if your organization is talking about or working on digital equity yet? Handful, small smattering. I know that it's not an alignment for everyone here, but raise your hand. Okay, raise your hand if you're a provider. Up. Okay, now put your hand down if you're not doing any digital equity. Oh boy, so that's you. You're the one doing it. Well, let's talk about that. Tell us about what your organization is doing to address digital equity.
So we have, excuse me, I'm Craig with NextLink. We're in about 12 states, and we have an outreach team in our external affairs area, and we work on government grants, and like I'm doing today, travel and try to hook up with local governments as well. In our team, there's a high awareness with half a dozen or more of us.
Okay.
We talk about it regularly. We mourn and grieve when ACP and things like that fail. And we look at affordability and plan for at-risk populations being able to still afford fast enough speeds that it's not a throwaway package, but a valuable subscriber plan. And one or two of us have a strong focus in digital equity. At least one of us deals with it every day.
Okay. So when you talk about, I'm sorry. I think we're going to ask the same question.
Probably.
So when you talk about so you're an ISP and your contribution to digital equity right now is around affordability.
Exactly.
Yes?
That's fair. I'm not sure that that's all of it, but
well, that's what I was
certainly-
kind of wondering. Have there been any other conversations about where a provider might provide support, might offer support in the equity space. But if you're not there yet, I was just kind of curious if those conversations had been had. Because if you're getting BEAD money, as you know, you have to do some digital equity work. But it's really important for us all to be thinking about it, because everyone in this room is in some way involved with putting broadband out there, with whether you're putting it in the ground or providing it to your community or some other role or everything in between. You can bring it, but if people can't use it, if they can't leverage it, if they can't improve their lives with it, we haven't done our jobs. This big push is to level the playing field to the extent possible. And leveling the playing field doesn't just mean bringing fiber to the door. It means getting it in that house, getting a device that is reliable, that teaching people what they need to know. Basic skills, internet security. When we talk about internet security, we're talking about one thing. When we have consumers who we're training for the first time, who's showing them their first device for the first time, internet security to them means don't give away your password. That's still really out there. And it doesn't make any sense to hook everybody up and then just see who floats to the top. This is a chance for us to lift all boats. So if you're not doing digital equity now and it's not part of your plan, remember that rising tides lift all boats. And even if you sell conduit, it would behoove you to think about where that conduit's going and what its real purpose is. And that's me on my soapbox there. And apparently I was really on my soapbox. I'm glad I wasn't looking behind me. Can we go to the next slide? Do we need to? Oh yeah, that one didn't turn out. Just
Can I ask a question on this one, just for my digital navigation purposes? I'm in the field, so I'm doing a lot of research, and we find that the affordability piece, that's pretty easy to solve. We can do that in-house. It's not easy to solve, but that's something straightforward. Thank you. You're not involving the huge population. But when we get into the digital skills of actually teaching people how to use the device, get connected, stay connected, be safe, is there anyone doing that kind of work yet? I know I talked to Tom, I believe, right? They're doing that down in Kansas City already. I know these urban populations, they kind of are always ahead of us just because they have the population there and the need is more apparent.
Social safety net.
Yep, social safety net. We don't have that a lot in the rural areas. The digital connection kind of has become a social safety net for a lot of people because they have to have that connection for doctors, for business, for financial, for almost everything down to school. Is there anyone doing any kind of digital skills work? So teaching and maybe informal, you guys have people come in, ask questions, just kind of answering, like, how do I do this kind of things of that nature?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Oh, Todd's coming around.
Yep,
I think as you talk about that, in my mind, digital equity is this, massive undertaking. But what you're talking about is what we've done every day for the last 100 years. Yeah. I mean, not with broadband, obviously, but, so, I mean, all of our customer service staff are trained to have these conversations. Our techs are showing people how to use things. We actually have a great vendor in the back of the room there that supplies us with parental controls on the devices that we have people download and show them how to use. And partner with vendors like that. So I think maybe just based on what you're talking about, I take for granted what we actually do. Yep. And I don't think of it as digital equity, but from the sounds of things, we probably do more than what I realize. I mean, we're in our school systems talking about the, internet safety and partnering with them, because kids are probably just as vulnerable, if not more so, because they're not as cautious as the elderly population. So, so I think we probably do a lot of the things. I don't classify it or call it digital equity.
You made a great point. That's I was going to say, I was going for is we don't realize we're actively participating in digital equity until it's brought to our attention a lot of the time. So if you're a provider and you have someone comes in and says, how do I do this? Just something simple, you don't even think about it, like adding a contact to your phone. That's digital equity. That's digital skills. Like anything, go to the library, you go to schools, you go to the doctor's office, you go to the store, you go to Hy-Vee. They have to have a large amount of technical skills now because of the online shopping. all of that stuff, it's all becoming this digital world where we're not just talking about computers and devices. We're talking about being able to actually do a job function, because that job function is now on some sort of technological device. So you guys are probably doing more than you think. If you're teaching your mother how to work Netflix, or you're teaching a cousin, or anything like that, we think about, we're all constantly helping people with new technology. You're already active in the digital equity space. So how can we turn that and take that into something where people are getting the skills they need on a bigger level, so that they are actively participating? Because we have some amazing people that would do some amazing things in this world if they had the access. For a lot of, access to the internet, access to a device, access to the skills, the access is the biggest part. They need the opportunity to be there.
That's right.
Years ago, we called it customer education.
Yes,
There you go.
Yes, customer education. Another name, customer service, community navigators, digital navigators. There's so many names that you could name it, but what you're doing is you're just a person there to help another person, teach a skill, give them an opportunity. That's what it looks like.
Can I ask a quick question? And I know we have a NTIA rep, and are you with the State Office of Broadband Development? So I know I look incredibly young, but I'm not so young that I don't forget. There was a time as I was growing up, if I or my parents or my brothers and sisters had any trouble making a phone call, we picked up this thing called a telephone and we dialed one number, a 0. And there was a person there provided by phone companies called the operator. And all they did was help us make phone calls. I'm just curious, with that metaphorical reference in mind, if any of the BEAD funding, DEA funding, could actually filter through to ISPs and providers who otherwise their business models don't support going into unserved and underserved areas. But to the extent that there's resources available to provide that digital equity type of support, I mean, it's not without precedent. And I don't know if those discussions are taking place at all in terms of eligibility for extra funding for ISPs, not to mention, community organizations. I was just talking to Gigi. Libraries, I hope that we get more progressive leadership among libraries, because among this population that typically is the most unserved, the one place that everyone always trusts to go for a decent internet signal and computers and some help is a library. But libraries themselves are very unwilling to stand up and say, we want more attention, we want more opportunities, because they're understaffed and they're stretched. And so I hope that between the available funding that goes to providers and the progressive, hopefully innovative thinking of library leaders, we can get more resources specifically dedicated to just the comment that this lady made, just user support, customer service support, because I think that's the only way we're going to achieve real digital equity, not just access and not just money for training, but real resources to be available all the time.
Thank you. I actually want to say one thing here. I am going to just put your mind at ease about one thing. The librarians are in the fight. They're in the fight. They are at the mat. Their national association is in Washington, D.C., and they are, there may be an individual librarian in an individual community who feels beat down. And I'm sure a lot of librarians feel beat down, but someone who may be past the point of feeling like they can put that last mile out. But the librarians are in the fight. They are doing amazing things. They are doing things that they haven't been respected for years, even though they've been doing them. And more acknowledgement and more funding is going to be coming their way. So that was
exactly. Yeah, no, that's what I was going to say. Jeff can speak on it more, but we have been in through the state planning process, we have tried, when there's open meetings, putting that input in. And from what I understand, the libraries, and then it's going to be looking at those community organizations and getting those skills in there is going to be a focus because the state recognizes that it has to be you have to hit every facet of digital equity to be successful.
One place I didn't go there. Bree has developed some really good traction in her digital navigator territory is with senior centers. Senior centers have high-speed internet most of the time, and they are places where most senior centers will let you hold an event. Not that you guys are going to be doing that. That includes people who aren't seniors. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. So how about veterans? So this is something, one of my many hats is trying to save the ACP and get the FCC to kind of put the broadband in, the broadband subsidy into the universal service program. And we've been trying to do outreach to veterans. It's some huge percentage of veterans, some huge percentage of the ACP is taken by veterans. So I was wondering what outreach, you're absolutely right about seniors, but how about veterans? Because they're great to have for any number of reasons, particularly political.
And I think that's a reason why their usage is so much. Veterans are very much one of those covered populations that are seen outright. You have the outreach and stuff for veterans. There's always the VFW is very active. There's those organizations that are going out there and they have the base to connect to those people because they're receiving services and stuff. I think they just have that draw to them. And that's where we see a disconnect with other covered populations is they don't have that central organization or that central social network bringing them in together, if that makes sense. I don't know how to describe it.
Really? All the veterans groups?
The veterans do, but the other ones we see like low-income families.
Right. I think Bree was saying like there's a national organization, a government or entity that serves all veterans. Whereas, so it may be easier to identify veterans
yes, exactly.
resources. And I know I don't think that's exactly what you asked.
I might not.
But I would say that there are of course lots of opportunities in local organizations, and we can go down to the social you can go down to the social level with VFWs. You can also try to connect with your local and regional VA administration. So those are always digital, like you were saying, Renee. Digital equity is service. Like that's what digital equity is.
I think we had one more question.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Sure. So following up on what I said a minute ago, NextLink is also running a pilot program. I think it's either in Oklahoma or Texas. We got $25,000 to help us set up a brick and mortar location that people can come to, like a senior center. That's been in our planning as well. But, the $25,000 was one time. And so my questions were, how do we sustain this? Because, a little bit of a shotgun blast on that is nice, but it's not going to go away. And in fact, we would like to replicate that once it gets wheels under it and do that in Iowa and Illinois and some other places too. And part of my job is going around talking with governments, and I'm here tomorrow. If anyone can hook me up with any of the local county people, that's part of the questions that we're asking. In training goes a long way, and training your seniors, well, they're not going into new jobs, but they are at risk.
But they still need to go to the doctor.
They're at risk,
they still need
and they
to pay
need
their bills,
telehealth.
and they still need, right, they absolutely need to.
Sure.
I think you brought up a great question. The $1 million question is, how is it sustainable?
Sustainable.
It
Right.
will not be sustained through federal funding. It will very unlikely in most states be sustained through state funding over in the long term. It's going to take communities becoming invested in the results. And if you are invested in the results at NextLink and you see lots of good things happening, maybe what you need to do is position it against the bottom line to the people in your company. More subscribers, more educated population. What if we did investigation in there about techs? Like, what if we did some workforce development when we saw, can we recruit some of these people? There is not yet an answer, and there probably won't be a clear one. But we are all going to have to look within our organizations, within our communities, and we're going to have the will to do it. And if the will is there, the way will be there. And I know that sounds trite, but it is going to be a long process. and hopefully it won't look like the ACP rollout and stumble. But that's why I think, as Chris was saying, in its wisdom, the NTIA gave the money to the states to deal with, because they know what they need. And some states will have an incredible commitment to digital equity, and some states won't care about it as much. So if it's important to your company and your values, then you take it personally. You take responsibility for it. And if we all take responsibility for the things that we can do and that we want to do, that's how we're going to create the landscape.
It goes back to that entrepreneurial.
Yep.
Where can you get those partnerships? Public, private? Who can you work with?
And the ask is over the next 6 to 9 months, as these state plans come out about what they are going to prioritize funding, that you're at the table of saying you're interested, because groups like CBAN want to be in the middle to help communicate that and organize it into a public-private partnership model by which those conversations are happening, because they're going to get made once or twice or 3 times at the state level. It's not going to be 20 or 30 times. So I think that is the ask of CBAN members, is if you're going to be a provider that has interest, come to the table when we try to put out a call for action, because the state is going to be listening for a while and they have funding. So.
Does anyone else have any questions for any other questions or comments, or want to talk about the work that they're doing? We've got about time for one more question. All right, well, if we're complete, I just wanted to invite you guys. We've decided we put some terrific digital equity planning resources up on a page on our website, and we invite you to, and there it is. There's a bit.ly link for it and this QR code, and we invite you to go check those out. In addition, we will be holding a 1-hour interactive webinar on April 17th on a Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central and all the other time zones that impacts differently. And it's called Getting Grounded in Your Digital Equity Planning. So if you don't know where you're going, you know you're doing some things, should it be more? Are we interested in it? Or we know it needs to be more, or we know that we know we're making a plan, but we don't quite know how to get there just yet. And that's what this session will start to address. And we invite you all. You don't have to pre-register. When you go onto the website, it will send you straight to the link that you will be able to just access. So just save that link.
We're using Zoom.
We're using Zoom, yeah. So it's going to be easy. All right, that's it. So thank you all very much for your time. Thanks for your participation.
Thank you.
And just stay tuned. In just a moment, IAMU will be starting its opening ceremonies, and Curtis invented an Olympic theme that's going to be really cool.
And then he got too busy to do the complete theme entirely the way he wanted to. But yes, it is. We now transition into the IAMU Broadband Conference opening ceremony. So you're all welcome now. The bar is open out in, they call it Loose Moose. I just call it the lobby area.
There's also snacks in the back.
Yep.
Forget
Snacks,
those.
drinks.
And everybody, thanks for coming. Those of you online, thanks so much for sticking with us through the little audio bumps there. And we appreciate everybody's support. Thanks.